Welcome to The Explainer. You've probably heard the term the male gaze thrown around, right? Well, today we're going to break down what it actually means. So let's get into it. From big Hollywood movies all the way down to your own Instagram feed, who is actually in control of the way we look? It's a massive question. And to find the answer, we have to go back to this really revolutionary idea from 1975, an idea that totally changed how we think about watching and, well, being watched.
Okay, so Section 1, a revolutionary idea. This is all about how a single essay from 1975 pretty much defined the way we see women in media. A film theorist named Laura Mulvey, in her essay Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, she gave a name to this incredibly powerful and often totally invisible force.
And that force was the male gaze. So what is it? Well, it's the idea that the camera, in, say, a classic Hollywood movie, assumes the perspective of a straight male viewer. The woman on screen is presented as this passive object for him to look at. You, the viewer, are basically forced to see her through his eyes. Mulvey said the camera is never neutral. It's got this masculine point of view, and it encourages something called scopophilia. It's a fancy word, but it just means the pleasure you get from looking at another person as an object.
Okay, but here's where things start to get a bit more complicated. Because, as you can imagine, that original theory wasn't the full picture. Almost right away, people started pointing out some major gaps. The big one, not everyone watching a movie has the exact same experience.
Take this powerful quote from the feminist critic Bell Hooks. She said, "I had to disavow the whiteness and the lack of representational recognition in order to enjoy watching Hollywood films." I mean, wow. She was pointing out the very specific experience of being a black woman watching these movies. She said to get any pleasure from them, she couldn't just sit back and watch. No, she had to actively, mentally edit the film as she went to sort of read it against the grain.
And that really opened up the conversation. People started asking, so who got left out? The original theory got criticized because it really centered on a white, straight experience. It often completely ignored black women, indigenous women, and other women of color. Not to mention LGBTQ+ viewers, or anyone whose body didn't fit a very narrow ideal. You know, the aging body, the fat body, the disabled body.
So this brings us to our next chapter, the gaze we internalize. Because this is where the whole idea of the gaze really evolves. It stops being just this external thing happening in a dark movie theater and becomes something way more personal, something we actually carry around with us, policing ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. The sociologist Rosalind Gill pointed out this huge shift. We went from an external, judgmental male gaze to what she called a self-policing, narcissistic gaze. In this new world of consumer culture, the goal wasn't just about being looked at by other people. No, it became about constantly watching ourselves, becoming our own biggest, harshest critics. This idea even got a name. A philosophical group called Tiquan called it the young girl. Now, this isn't literally about a young girl. It's a concept, a kind of mindset. The young girl is the perfect consumer in this new system. She's someone who defines herself by what others think of her, who sees her appearance as her entire essence. She's encouraged to, quantify her beauty, to see her body as a project that needs to be perfected, usually by buying more stuff.
And this right here is the core logic. Your appearance entirely exhausts your essence. Think about that. It means you're not what you do or what you think or who you are on the inside. You are simply how you look. The surface, the appearance, it becomes absolutely everything.
And if you think that sounds intense, well, let's talk about looking in the digital mirror. Because this self-monitoring thing went into complete overdrive with social media and the invention of the front-facing camera. It turned the gaze into a full-time, 24/7 job.
Which leads to this really fascinating question. Does taking a selfie cut the man out of the picture? I mean, on the one hand, yeah, you're the one holding the camera. You control the angle, the lighting, everything. But we're all shaped by the culture around us, right? So is it possible that the old gaze just pops back up, but in this new self-inflicted way?
It really feels like we're caught between two sides of the same lens. You have voyeurism. That's the classic pleasure of looking at others without being seen, like you in a dark movie theater. But now we have exhibitionism, this modern demand to be looked at, to perform for this invisible audience, like an influencer or a webcam star. And this isn't even that new. Way back in 1996, this internet pioneer Jenny Cam live-streamed her dorm room 24/7. And her reason for it? She said knowing people were watching made her feel secure. That was one of the first big signs of the culture we're in now, where being watched can feel validating, and watching other people is just what we do all the time.
And this has created this really powerful kind of vicious cycle. Some people even call it Snapchat surgery. So here's how it works.
First, you're scrolling, and you see all these digitally perfected faces and bodies, right? Filters, posts, the whole thing. Step 2, you internalize that gaze. You start looking at yourself with that same critical eye, trying to spot your own flaws. Which leads to step 3. You start identifying all these imperfections by comparing your real, unfiltered self to that online ideal. And finally, for some, that leads to seeking surgical solutions, a huge rise in cosmetic procedures to try and make reality match the filter.
It's like a new kind of panopticon. You know, that idea of a prison where a single guard can see everyone so the prisoners police themselves? Well, this new panopticon is playful, it's voluntary, and it lives right there on your phone. And that's the crucial part. This form of control doesn't feel like control, it feels like fun, like self-expression. And honestly, that makes it so much more powerful.
Okay, so if the gaze is everywhere, are we just doomed? Can we ever escape it? Well, the good news is people are fighting back. This is all about how individuals are subverting, resisting, and reappropriating the gaze. Artists and everyday people are finding these really creative ways to fight back, to look back at the lens, and to reclaim their own image. So let's look at a few of these modes of resistance. We've got the artist's gaze, which uses self-portraiture to challenge beauty norms. Then there's the sensory body, which is all about focusing on non-visual feelings. And finally, the negotiated veil, using dress as a tool for agency. These are just a few powerful examples of how people are talking back to that all-seeing eye.
First up, the artist's gaze. Look at the work of artist Jen Davis. In her self-portrait series 11 Years, she totally subverted the way fat bodies are often looked at, what you might call the medical gaze. You know that stereotype in news stories of the headless fatty, just a torso, no identity? Well, she completely rejected that. She put her face, her identity, and her own story right at the center of the frame.
Okay, second, we have the sensory body. Resistance doesn't have to be visual, right? This is about choosing clothes for how they feel to the touch, or even how they sound. It's about prioritizing your own personal experience over the visual judgment of others. There's this great example of a woman who loved her rustling jacket because it audibly announced her arrival. It was about her feeling, not just her look.
And finally, let's talk about this quote. One gives her voice a body, the other gives her body a voice. This is about the dual resistance of some Iranian women. On the one hand, by blogging online, they give their voice a body in the digital world. On the other hand, by making strategic choices about wearing the veil, they can give their physical body a different kind of voice in public, one that can help them navigate spaces and gain access to education or work.
So, what's the big takeaway here? The main thing to remember is that the gaze isn't just one single thing. It's a conversation. It's an idea that has evolved all the way from old movies to the screen you're holding right now. And the power to define how we see and how we are seen, well, that's something that's constantly up for grabs, constantly being negotiated. Which leaves us with this final question. In a world that is so completely built on looking, how will you choose to be seen? It's wild, right? A question that connects a dense academic essay from the 70s directly to the next photo you decide to post. Thanks for watching.